This is a weekend edition of the Core Report.
Hi and welcome. This is the Core Report's weekend special edition, and it's on Ratan Tata, the former chairman of Tata Sons who passed away last week. One of my last interviews with him, when he was still chairman of Tata Sons and the group, he stepped down in 2012, by the way, was on Going Global. Now, this was in 2005 and it was on television. I asked him why the Tata Group was on an acquisition spree like it was at that time. He gave many reasons. But at the core of it, as it became clearer, was that for him, success also meant being a globally recognized name and brand, not just the same as exporting products overseas. The environment is allowing me to do that. All these years, I've been an Indian player, and now I can be a global citizen, he told me. It turns out, as we will shortly hear, that Tata was clear on which way he wanted the group to go even as he applied for the job. For example, how Tata Motors, then Telco, would become a car company. And yes, if you caught that, he apparently had to apply for the chairman's position to JRD Tata against then Tata satraps like Rusi Modi, Darbari Seth, among others, and make a presentation on what he would do and how he would do to take things forward. Allegations followed on favoritism, but then died down. Today, we will delve into the operational side of Ratan Tata and what those who worked closely with him at very senior positions took away in the heat and dust of running businesses, whether passenger vehicles or software, to his thrust towards the digital economy in his later years and what motivated him to do that. And finally, a view from someone who worked with his predecessor and legend J.R.D. Tata and him, that's Ratan Tata, and thus, I guess, the inevitable comparison. But some of the biggest takeaways are small, and they boil down to humility, patience, and a sense of calm about things, about what you can control and not. I began this little journey by speaking with former Tata Consultancy Services Managing Director and CEO S. Ramadorai on his time with Ratan Tata. One major milestone during Ramadorai's time was the 2004 listing of TCS, a big one by any standards, also because TCS till then was privately held and a cash cow for the Tata Group. Ramadorai took over as CEO of TCS in 1996 when the company's revenues were $155 million. When he left in 2009, TCS was a $6 billion global IT services company and has grown since then.
I think every interaction with Mr. Tata, traveling with him, was a learning experience and more in terms of a friend or a professional rather than a boss versus employee. We traveled together a lot even prior to the IPO after he took over as the chairman of the group as well as I became the chairman of CEO of TCS. Some of the anecdotes are we went on a trip to Latin America. And we took a very interesting route that is from Bombay to Joburg and then Joburg to Sao Paulo non-stop flight. I think lo and behold, it was on a Sunday we decided to leave Bombay. And then as we landed in Joburg, as we go into the immigration counter, the people say that to Mr. Tata that he cannot get out of immigration. The reason he was very perplexed, and I got my clearance and I was about to go out, and then I saw him not able to make it. Lo and behold, we found that his visa had expired. There was no way we could do anything to get the visa process done on a Sunday. And as I come out of the immigration to the baggage area, and then the people wanting to greet us from Tata Group in South Africa, they got one bouquet for me, one for Mr. Tata. What I told them was that give both the bouquets to me because Mr. Tata is stuck inside and is not able to come out. I had a nice room, a shower right in the airport, whereas he had to have a dry shower in the bathroom for the last almost 6-7 hours. There was an incident where both they laughed it, but because of the experience where he never got irritated, started scolding his people or whatever it is. But mistakes can happen by anyone, any place, anywhere, and you get to face some of the situations with a colleague or with a friend, and that was the lesson from that. A similar anecdote, but I thought I'll give this one, which is stuck in my mind all the time. And I keep reminding him once in a way, we had joked together saying that we remember the trip.
The question I have posed to most people was, what and where did the fundamental drive for Ratan Tata come from? There could be lofty goals, but in Ratan Tata's case, as it is for many entrepreneurs, raw passion was the important motivator and driver. And I guess the satisfaction of seeing a product dream turn into product reality.
His whole quality of leadership was always excellence in everything. And excellence has no bar. You keep raising the bar from your previous experience to the next experience. By challenging, whether it was in Tata Motors with the nano car or in TCS with the Tata Business Excellence model to achieve the score of 600 plus, his behavior was the same, where he would challenge saying that I definitely want this to be done. A similar situation is when we had done the IPO and the first quarter of results we had to disseminate. He was very particular that I will not have anything other than 16th of the end of quarter, he had to publish the results. We said it's the horrendous task with all the subsidiaries. I don't know what you do, but I want that to be done because they had to claim our number one place with the IPO where people would know what this company is and it will all beat all the benchmarks. Same thing when that nano car, and we had gone to Delhi together, and I happened to be there and I attended the inauguration or the launch of the nano vehicle. And the leadership is where a person across the spectrum, the moment he saw the joy of launching that product, he came and hugged me, which is very unusual for a person, a group chairman, to come and say that I could see that moment of team spirit and the moment of being together. Almost tears in his eyes to see a product of his vision came out, and here is the launch that was happening.
Now, combining the raw passion with execution focus and determination to set and stretch deadlines was another quality that Ratan Tata shone out in. But there is something else to that stretch target, because for some leaders, it might end at the point that the target has been set and the job defined. But for Ratan Tata, it went beyond that. And this is how.
2 or 3 things. I think the can-do attitude is the first one that leaders conduct. Challenge the team to raise above the bar is the second thing. This happens whether it's in the Tata Group or I've seen in the government, like the National Stock Exchange when we had to launch, or the National Securities Depository, where the late Dr. Manmohan Singh also raised those to say that these are the launch dates, guys, you got to deliver it. So you work backwards from that to say that what are all the engineering challenges, what are all the financial challenges, what are all the integration challenges, and what are all the manpower and capacity building challenges to make sure that it happens. You cannot compromise quality, you cannot compromise the price point that has been fixed, and the launch date is fixed. Then you work against all the odds to make sure it happens. That's how leaders. But then, whether it is Mr. Tata or anyone else, they will come and continuously monitor, are you having any problems? How can I be of help to you, rather than saying that I given you the deadlines and then you disappear. I think this is another hallmark which we all learned from him. And we practice more importantly than just learning and forgetting about it.
I had a question. Suppose you were to take a present day challenge, let's say artificial intelligence appending jobs. How would Ratan Tata respond to it if he was in an executive position? What could we take away from his leadership approach and response to a situation, either a static or an evolving one, and how he problem solve?
The first one is he understood the role of the board. The role consists of independent director, the role consists of the chairman, and this happens to be Mr. Tata in this case. The kind of R&D and the technology that is going to impact us is always thought through proactively rather than after it hits it. So if AI was thing that was going to disrupt the whole life, whether it's health, whether it's agriculture, whether it is IT industry or whatever, or manufacturing, he would have opened his eyes a couple of years ago based on the board deliberations or the R&D deliberations, etc., and say that let's make the necessary investments proactively for it to happen. And that's a leadership quality which you'll see in every single third person. And that's what challenged us to say that let's look at the impossible and then let's put the learning hat. Then make sure we are prepared when the tsunami hits you or before the tsunami hits you. That's the kind of leadership these people demonstrate, and that's a lesson we all practiced and also percolate. So if AI was going to be hitting you tomorrow, we'll be prepared today. That's the point.
Ratan Tata's successes and failures are often pegged around Tata Motors and passenger vehicles, being the company and projects he was seen most passionate about, and also something he associated himself with quite directly. For instance, he could have been more of a hotelier with the Taj Group or a steel company executive with Tata Steel, but his calling clearly was in cars and automobiles, and then, of course, aviation and airlines. But at that time, the Indica and Nano, one which turned out well and provided the springboard for Tata's eventual acquisition of Jaguar Land Rover from Ford, who they almost sold the passenger vehicle business to, by the way. And then the airlines, which he made the group get back into. But airlines is a story for a different day. One person who worked closely with Ratan Tata at the time was Ravi Kant, who joined Tata Motors in February 1999, ran the commercial vehicle business, and then became managing director in 2005, and then retired in 2009 from his executive position, but continued to be with the company and group for much longer. Ravi Kant is credited, among other things, with turning around Tata Motors at a crucial time and also launching the famous mini truck, the Tata Ace.
Let me start by some generalization. Is that Mr. Tata has been a very bold thinker, and he doesn't get constrained by what is available and what is the current situation. He looks at what could the possibilities be. Therefore, thinking very big, and that is something which was very unique to him. And that's why you could aim for some very big things and achieve, would say, most of it. And this, he imbued the whole group with this. And that is the reason Tata Motors included. The whole group grew from very, I would say, modest level to over 100 billion. Out of which, when I joined, Tata Motors was 1.6. 15 years later, when I left, it was $39 billion. Now, it's a huge, huge jump. It's a big thing by even world standards, $39 billion. It couldn't have happened without Mr. Tata's thinking bold and taking some very, very long leaps. That is one thing. Number two, he had a lot of faith and trust in his people. See, you can't do this kind of thing without having trust in your people, having faith in your people. That, okay, I'm thinking that way, but who's going to make it happen? And therefore, you rely on your people to make it happen. And that people does not mean just the top leadership. It means people down the level, people managers, people workers, everybody is how to make this thing happen. So he trusted people, and that trust was reciprocated. So in the sense that because he trusted people, the environment was very open. So even junior people like the engineers will not be afraid to speak their mind. Normally in a company, this does not happen. Where the top boss, especially person of the stature of Mr. Tata, is saying something, most of the time people will listen to it and say yes or not there. But he encouraged views from people, especially younger people, to speak their minds, and people did that. And that, I think, enriched the whole, I would say, whole process. And newer things came out, many more things came out. And he had an open mind to look at the proposals, irrespective of from where it was done. And that was his great quality. So a combination of these two things is thinking big and having trust in your people. And that makes for a very deadly combination. And his third is he supports it. I mean, things can go wrong. He always understood that things can go wrong. But whether things are going wrong due to wrong intentions or it is a genuine mistake, that he was very, very clear about. Even in my case, Govind, when I joined the company in 1999, two things. One is the economy was going through a very crisis period. And economy tanked. That time, Tata Motors were mostly only, in fact, commercial vehicles. And because of commercial vehicles, strong linkage with the economy, commercial vehicles had also gone down. Although Tata Motors protected its market share, but the overall table went down. And that resulted in a 500 crore loss. And I joined a company about which I did not know anything. So Mr. Tata, in a way, Mr. Tata was a risk taker. So not only in products and other opportunities he took risk, he also took risk on people. I mean, I can genuinely say that he took risk on me, a person who had no experience of four-wheelers. And then he takes that person. Can you imagine how much he would have got comments from other people, even his colleagues or other people? that you are taking somebody who has no experience of this. And auto industry, as you know, is very incestuous kind of industry that people just move from one company to another company. But he broke that down and he took another person. And first 2 years, therefore, were very, very, very challenging. Both for this reason that the market was down, and number two, I was new. But he kept faith in me because things didn't happen overnight. I was doing many things were doing, other colleagues were there. Everybody was working towards it because it was a question of pride being hurt, of Tata Motors having turned in a loss. But 2 years down the road, the team did a remarkable job and had a turnaround. As you know, we made a profit of 500 crores. At that time, he would have been under great distress. He would have been, a lot of people would be critical of him as to why have you brought this guy? Nothing is happening. 6 months have gone, 9 months have gone, 12 months have gone, nothing. But he kept faith. He kept faith. He kept supporting. Had he not supported, there was no question. I mean, either I would have been chucked out or I would have left. But he kept faith and he kept trust. And I think that is the quality which brings out the best in a person, in a leader. And that is indescribable unless you are in that kind of situation. You know, Nano is a difficult story, if I may say so, because it was one of the best pieces of innovation in auto industry. I can say that. And it was something which is kind of white sheet of paper exercise, working backwards from what the price should be, and therefore what components price should be, what should be the bill of materials and things like that. It was an amazing thing, and it's kudos and compliments to engineers at Tata Motors and our suppliers put together, then finally made it happen. 7 years down the road, when the commodity prices had shot up and the concept of the car had changed hugely, because earlier it was just an ordinary kind of vehicle. But finally, when Nano came out, it met all the safety and other conditions and safety requirements. And therefore, it was impossible to make this thing. So, he kept faith. He kept faith in people, his own engineers, because he could feel that it cannot be done by outside. So, of course, for design, we had somebody from Italy design out. But otherwise, the engineering and everything else was done there. And the team made it happen. I mean, if he had not thought about it, if he had not challenged people, and cause he challenged people rose to the occasion. And, you know, you were not able to get either the cost or this thing. And every time things were getting bad, and I do remember a couple of occasions we thought it's not going to happen. And we said, let's abandon the project. But team came back, found solutions, and finally we made it happen. So I think this is the greatness of Mr. Tata. It's not only he thought big, but he imbued people with the same thought process that you can think big and you can make it happen. And that, I think, was a great quality which he inculcated in, I would say, in all of us. As I said at the beginning, he was not constrained by what was available. He could see far, and you could see that, okay, this could happen, and why not? And he had the boldness, and he had the guts to say, why not? And therefore, when Jaguar Land Rover happened, which happened after 4 years after our acquiring Daewoo truck company in South Korea. And therefore, by then we had some knowledge, some feel for what to do when you acquire a company in the foreign land. In fact, South Korea was even more difficult because people didn't speak in English language. They spoke only in Korean. And they were very, very nationalistic. They are very nationalistic. That's how the country has progressed so much. Although it was a tough going, but I would say we laid the template for running Ward at this Daewoo in South Korea. And that kind of worked very well. later on, 4 years later, when we were going to acquire Jaguar Land Rover. In both times, there were 10 bidders. And we were perhaps thought to be, in both cases, we were thought to be the most, I would say, least qualified. Both in case of South Korea, people felt that we are some third world country and therefore we don't have the wherewithal to. Of course, there's a long story how we overcame that. And similarly, in case of Jaguar Land Rover, if you remember, there was the president of US Dealers Association who said, who's this tandoori chicken company trying to take over Jaguar Land Rover? And then it happened. And after it happened, we went down kind of a vicious stop, six-day trip across the US. And we met with so many dealers that they're this thing in groups, small group. And finally, that person who made this comment became our best friend and best well-wisher. So that is Mr. Tata's personality, because he comes across as a very open person, very sincere person, very genuine person. And therefore, you can't help but be not affected by that. Because everywhere, in case of Devo also, he went there, he sat in the canteen with the workers. He told them, look, we have come here to help you realize your goals. Same thing happened in Jaguar Land Rover. We had a town hall meeting in which he said, we have not come here to kind of things from you. We have come here to contribute to your success. And we give you a free hand to make your own future. I mean, those are very, very important words for coming straight from the company who bears his name. I mean, so can you understand the confidence that he's giving to those people and saying that, look, you carry on with your job. You're doing good work. You carry on. We support you, making it happen. That was his feeling, that we will play a supportive role to you and not kind of acquire a role. We are not acquirer, unlike the Western companies, unlike the American companies. We are here to help you charge your own future. It's a dramatic difference in the attitude of and what you do to people whose company you are acquiring.
A facet of Ratan Tata, which became more evident after he stepped down as chairman of Tata Sons, was his desire to deep dive into the startup world, which had obviously begun exploding around him and us. You have to remember that everything Tata ran until now within the group were essentially old economy companies. TCS is an IT company and also services, but not a new age technology company as we think of them in the internet, digital and e-commerce age. While he invested some of his money in a few startups, the fate of all I'm not so sure of, he did also reach out to venture capital firms and worked with them as much as I can see to understand what was happening in India's new economy and also to meet the young people or other entrepreneurs as perhaps to capitalize on some good investments. It was in this context that he met with Sudhir Sethi, chairman of Chiratae Ventures, formerly IDG Ventures, which manages about $1.2 billion of venture money. Prior to starting out in venture capital, Sudhir worked in senior positions in companies like HCL and Wipro. So I began by asking Sudhir how he met with Ratan Tata and how did that relation develop?
I first met him in 2015, August 12th, 4 p.m. to be precise, at his office in South Bombay. And he had given me 30 minutes. And after 30 minutes, I remember him sort of going to the phone and saying, I just need some more time. And I got another 30 minutes. And what struck me at that point of time, I mean, I was awed, if I may say, in my first meeting with him. And from my point of view, I did not know what I wanted. I just wanted to meet him. And Venkat, his EA, had told me that, look, he will ask you something at the end. And so after about 50 minutes, and he had got all the information on the startup ecosystem, Venkat had obviously given that to him. Whatever we had sent, he knew about us as such. And I think in the first 50 minutes, I found him extremely curious and extremely to the power of N curious. What's happening? What are entrepreneurs doing? What kind of innovation is happening? And it was a barrage of questions which were to find out he had just stepped down as the chairman at that point of time, and he was chairman emeritus at that point of time. So I was overawed by his question and, of course, answered everything. And then 50 minutes into the meeting, he said, what can I do for you? And I said, Mr. Tata, it will be such a pleasure and a privilege if you could sort of ongoing advise us and be on our advisory board. And so he said, it will be a privilege. I had almost tears in my eyes at that point of time. Very humble, very curious to learn. And after that, for about 6 years, he gave us almost every quarter between 2 to 4 hours. That was amazing when we brought entrepreneurs. And his curiosity was amazing. His value add was amazing. And one anecdote I do remember, his sense of humor was amazing. Very humble. And I think once he did get late to the meeting by about 5 minutes, and his assistant came and said, Mr. Tata will be late. And he came 5 minutes late and he was profusely apologizing. That humility is something which we, have to learn from. Second, he never made us feel that he's in front of Mr. Ratan Tata. That was another quality which he had. We were so comfortable. I was so personally comfortable. And one meeting, I requested him that I would really like some of our entrepreneurs to meet him. And this anecdote I will never forget, because in a room, we were sort of there, and his assistant Dilnas told me that he's just had a surgery on his foot, and so kindly ensure that he doesn't stand too much. I said, that's fine. There was, I think, 16 or 18 entrepreneurs from our portfolio who were in the room, and I sort of briefed everybody that keep sitting, don't stand up, because if you stand up, Mr. Tata will stand up. But, young entrepreneurs were overawed to be in front of him. And one by one, everybody gave a few minutes about what the company was doing. He listened, he added value, and so on and so forth. There was conversations, and after about, I would say, 75 to 80 minutes, maybe 90 minutes, it was time to go. And young entrepreneurs, there was a lady who came up front and they were shaking hands, but suddenly she said, can I take a selfie? And Mr. Tata was standing. Now, that was not what was supposed to be. And he was courteous. He was absolutely indulgent. He was thoroughly enjoying himself in spite of the pain. So all the 18 entrepreneurs, and there was a cameraman also at the back, and all the 18 entrepreneurs took selfies, took photographs, and they were literally overjoyed. At the end of those 18 entrepreneurs who were with me, at that point of time from our portfolio, I actually felt a tap on my shoulder. And somebody tapped on my shoulder and said, sir, if you don't mind, can I take a picture with Mr. Tata? And he handed me the camera. That was the cameraman who handed me the camera. And I took the cameraman's picture and Mr. Tata. That was an amazing, and he obliged him. Many meetings were between me and him, or between my co-founder TCM, myself and him. And we used to take challenges which we are facing to him as a venture firm. And, I consider us as a venturepreneur, which is a mix of venture and entrepreneurship. And in one of the area, we were talking to him about strategy and how to scale, how to build an organization. Very interestingly, he said, skills can be taken and attitude is something which you need to build, culture of the firm. There's a lot of discussions on that because, we were new into the whole system when I first met him, building an organization which we wanted to be a leader. And then during the course of 2015, 3-4 years later, there was a need from a market perspective that we change our name from IDG Ventures to Chiratae Ventures. And a lot of things happened. We went to an agency, etc., etc. And 18 months later, we had a new name, Chiratae. And I'll give you the background of that. But during that time, I had 3 meetings with Mr. Ratan Tata. The first meeting, I was telling him that, look, we have to change our name from IDG. And what do you think? What should be the brand? What should be the characteristics of the brand? And he said, give me some interesting insight into the industry. And I gave an industry that almost 95% foreign capital and Indian capital is. So he had read about it, by the way. So every meeting, I thought I was coming prepared, but he was always prepared. And he said, look, you should keep an Indian name. Do not keep a foreign name as such. And I still remember his words. I asked him, why an Indian name? Everybody's keep up a foreign name. He said, Indian capital will one day be predominant. And he had also read that something like this is happening in China at that point of time. So domestic capital is something which you should reflect in your name. You should be a domestic firm. That means an Indian firm. And you should, I remember his words, that you should stick out like a sore thumb. And that was very interesting. And I asked him why. He said, you will get better people to join you. You'll be servicing your clients, which is your investor, okay, in a much better way if the brand is your own and you have ownership, your team has ownership, and somebody like an entrepreneur, you'll get better entrepreneurs to come to you. It is amazing, Govind, that and I had 3 meetings with him over 18 months on the brand itself, and we finally kept the word Chiratae because, some of us are wildlife photographers and it's a Kannada word for the wild leopard. But we did see a huge benefit overall, a huge benefit. And the benefit was we had people joining us from international firms. Entrepreneurs thought that, hey, this is a local firm, decision-making here could be faster. And so many, many benefits came to us. And of course, we became very large in Indian rupee capital raising. So that is one very clear example he gave. I think the other thing was one anecdote I want to remember. I do remember we were fundraising and I got a call from Kazakhstan. And this was about a year after Mr. Tata joined us on the advisory board. And it's important to realize, many of us don't realize the value of governance, the value of brand, reputation in such a massive manner, which he did have. And I was on the call with this Kazakhstan investor and I said, how did you hear about us? He said, well, Mr. Tata is on your board and we know Mr. Tata very well in Kazakhstan. So it was obvious that we will at least call you and get to know you better. That is amazing. It is stunning how one individual was known on a global and domestic basis in terms of reputation. So that's the value that he did to us. I think fundamentally, our reputation was heightened because we shook hands with Mr. Tata. And he did allow us to do that. And we give Lifetime Achievement Awards also. And I was so hesitant. A jury chose Mr. Tata to give a Lifetime Achievement Award. And I was talking to Dilnaz, and Dilnaz said, don't worry. I was like, will he accept it? And it's up to him. Then she said, look, he's going in his car to the airport. Why don't you just give him a call? I gave him a call, and there and before he said, it'll be a pleasure and a privilege. Such a humble man is an amazing, amazing history.
I also asked Sudhir a question that was on my mind for some time. How did Ratan Tata sync with this world, or rather his world, and why did he feel the need to immerse himself with the startup ecosystem? And what did Sudhir take away from that? And more so because Ratan Tata came, like I said earlier, from a traditional industrial background.
I think Mr. Tata belonged to the world. There was nothing called old and new. He was always innovating. He was always agile. He was always, in our conferences, he came thrice. And I can tell you, he was walking faster than me during that time as such. Agility, innovation, curiosity to change things, build bigger with the highest governance level and reputation. And he stood for India. He stood for a very strong India. And I think that will motivate us forever.
And finally, the inevitable comparison. J.R.D. Tata was a legend like few others. He was a builder and carried forward the principles of founder Jamshedji Tata. Remember, he not only started Air India but also flew the first aircraft. Though flight and aircraft are something that Ratan Tata and J.R.D. Tata had in common, though Ratan Tata was not directly related to J.R.D. Ratan Tata was an inheritor in some ways, for sure, but made his mark by building upon what he took on and taking the Tatas and in some sense India into the post-liberalization age. In many ways, as someone who's seen some of this, a much tougher task than actually starting from scratch. I spoke with Roger Pereira, who worked with both J.R.D. Tata and Ratan Tata, though more with J.R.D. as it happens. Pereira used to work in advertising in Bombay and then started a communications company which worked closely with the Tatas for many years. He also shares a story on Ratan Tata's entry into the Tata Group, which you may not know, at least I did not, in this form.
My relationship with J.R.D. was kind of very personal. And it started when I was 21 and a trainee copywriter. And he was flying the route that he started with from Karachi, Ahmedabad, and Mumbai, and Bombay at that time. And I was a trainee copywriter, and he wanted to know who's the person who wrote this ad. And so, then it went on right till his death. This was commemorating his 30 years of Air India and of his flying. His philosophy for Air India was that each ad has to work 500 times harder than any Pan Am or TWA ads, because those were the leading airlines in those days, so we don't have the kind of money. And so I had a tongue-in-cheek. We used to take topics very much like what Amul is doing. Amul is doing exactly what Air India we used to do for Air India. Then I got into trouble because of that, and there was furor in the media. Nehru was very upset, and Congressman Chelas, if I might use that word, had asked that I be summoned to the Lok Sabha, etc., etc. And the ads used to change every Friday because JRD's philosophy is movies change every Friday, ads also should change every Friday. And the primary one was at Kim's Corner. So Saturday, Beram Contractor, glorified the ad, etc. And I was a hero, or Friday rather, and I was a hero. And suddenly on Saturday, those days when there was no TV, there's a lot of criticism. And how can a person be so unpatriotic? And Air India at that time was private, be so unpatriotic, this person should be summoned, etc., etc. Then, to cut a long story short, on Monday I got a call at closer to 12 noon. I was totally deflated by then. And the person on the other line is that Mr. Tata here. And so, I virtually stood to attention. I see. They said, who created this ad? I said, I did, sir. So he said, but you're not an artist. The problem is with the color of the shorts. So I said, no, Bahadur did it, but I requested Bahadur to make the color red. So I take full responsibility. He burst out laughing and he said, I'll tell Nehru that I did it. He called him Pandit, I think. I'll tell him that I did it and let's see what he says. And the controversy died. And after that, I became much closer to him. Ratan I came to know much later. Unlike, Adi Godrej was in college with me. And it was, I think the year was 91. And GRD was going to Jamshedpur. The previous year, he had missed going to Jamshedpur on Founders Day because he had fractured a leg when getting out from the helicopter onto the Alps. He used to love skiing. He must have been about 88 at that time, at that year. And, but that was the phenomenal man. And so there was a fire in the tent on Founders Day. So he was very keen to visit Jamshedpur on Founders Day. And then he asked me, he said, would you like to come? Have you ever been to Jamshedpur? So I said, I have been, but many years ago. He said, would you like to come? I said, I'd love to. And you know what had happened? Rusi Modi declared himself as chairman of Tata Steel. And I believe just before that, GRD had declared Ratan as the chairman of Tata Sons, starting with Tata Industries, etc. And I don't know if you are aware of this. He had asked each chief of company to make presentations on what they would do for the Tata Group should they be appointed the chairman. So each one, Darbari Seth, Kenkar, Rusi Modi, all of them made presentations. But they just spoke off the bat. Ratan had taken the trouble of working together with Raju Bingye, who was to head Tata Strategic Management, and a professor of marketing from IIM, I forgot his name. And they presented a plan. I've got a copy of the plan somewhere. I think I have the only copy available. And in that plan, he suggested that they should get out of soaps. That means they should sell Tomco, they should sell Lakme, and focus on steel and automotives.
And coming to the present, this is perhaps the start of it all. The clarity and vision that would define Ratan Tata as people outside would see over the years. And it started with the Indica.
That's right, the Indica. He had a terrific vision. And he similarly said the only company that was doing exceedingly well is TCS. All the others have to be redone. At that time, I believe Tata Steel was the most unprofitable steel company, next only to the SAFE, because, steel was subsidized in India, etc. So his vision was to make Tata Tisco the most profitable steel company in the world, for Tata locomotives to move into passenger cars, etc., etc. On that basis, JRD appointed him the chairman. And this was before liberalization, but he saw it. He said it has to be inevitable. Liberalization has to happen. And as I mentioned, Raju Bingye helped him on that. And Jay was so impressed that he appointed him chairman. He was accused of very kind of hush-hush of being partial to relative, etc. But that was not true. It was totally on merits. But, in Jay's case, I was more an advertising man, except when I started my own company, that's a separate story altogether. In Ratan's case, I was more a crisis management guy. And he said, why don't you start doing this? He referred to the campaign that Tata Steel ran for so many years to put George Fernandez's nationalization program off. The campaign was, we also make steel, although they used advertising. And he said, if you can do this sort of work, I'll help you. All the Tata companies will be your clients. And the first assignment he gave us was, he was implementing this surrender of or sale of Tata oil mills, that is Tomco, to Hindustan Lever. Now, the two, Tomco and Hindustan Lever, had 87% of the market share. There was a concern about MRTP laws being enforced, and they would not be, but we managed. So really, it was how we positioned the merger, and he was very happy. The biggest crisis, I think, was the other chiefs were very upset. So they started a massive campaign against Ratan, saying that, he was a failure in Nelco, and how can he be chairman of Tata Group? And, the media, and I'm sure you would have been exposed to that, was full of negative stories about Ratan, and the Tata Group was doomed, etc. And that's when Ratan came over and said, look, I'd like you to work with us. And he spent hours with us. He came to a tiny little office at Kemp's Corner. And I think we went on till 12 midnight because he said, you need to know me in order to help me. And we went, I think it was 10:30, we realized we hadn't had dinner. So we went across to Shalimar Hotel, which was next door, and had dinner. After that, he insisted that I meet him at his home in Colaba. And he was very generous as a person. In fact, although I said the relationship was not so personal, there was quite a few exceptions. For example, Ratan never drank, but he'd keep a bottle of good whiskey for me. Because I'd like a peck or two in a bit, especially the evening session that goes on to 9, 10 or 11 o'clock in the night. But he was very gracious. I remember once Roma was returning from California, where she had gone to do a postgrad program, and he was on the same plane, and Roma was getting married, so she had a lot of hand baggage, and he insisted on carrying the hand baggage for her. He also attended their weddings, So there were personal factors, but otherwise it was more professional.
Do inheritors do better than their founders? Usually not, unless they hand over management to a professional cadre. Now, J.R.D. Tata did ensure that while Ratan Tata was family in a sense, he got the position by fighting for it like a professional manager would. So Ratan Tata also had to prove himself time and again, partly because of what the job brought with it and the companies at that time, but also because of his own stretched goals, like the passenger vehicle projects that we've talked about. Ratan Tata showed that he would not give up easily. As a matter of fact, he hardly ever gave up. He empowered and monitored. And he advanced the principle of social causes that the Tata Group stood for, and then he retired and took a step back and handed over to an incoming professional, the fracas with Cyrus Mistry notwithstanding. He never gave up on cars or on airlines, as is evident from the Tata's obviously risky move to buy Air India from the government when it already had the successful Vistara and AirAsia joint ventures running. His heart, mind, and soul were in the skies. That was the Core Report with me, Govindraj Ethiraj. Do stay connected with more of our coverage at the Core. You can check out our website or sign up to our newsletter for our exclusive stories, one in-depth feature a day on www.thecore.in. Do also track us on LinkedIn, where we usually post synopses or extracts of our top stories and interviews. We would love your feedback on how we can make business more interesting and relevant, including, of course, India's vibrant manufacturing sector. So write to us at feedback@thecore.in, and thank you once again for listening.